If you had one day simply to explore, where would you go? And who would you take? Where would you fly? And when you got there, what would you choose to drive? Today, my choice takes me to the Scottish Highlands for a road trip in a vehicle that's new and different.
Electric cars are inevitable. They promise to deliver a far more efficient, far greener, far quieter way of getting from A to B. They might even prolong the very environment that we live in. But what do electric cars offer to people who maybe aren't so interested in driving for efficiency? What do electric cars offer to people who are far more interested in driving for pleasure?
This is the Audi RS e-tron GT, a futuristic reinterpretation of the Grand Tourer. In other words, this is a sports car that's designed specifically for people who want to drive fast over long distances. We already know that electric cars are fantastic at the former, but their suitability for the latter is still maybe up for debate.
That's the well-trotted out theory, isn't it? That electric cars don't have very good range. But both versions of the e-tron GT have very good range. Both versions use a 93.4 kilowatt-hour battery pack, and that gives the standard model access to 298 miles of range. This one, the RS, can do 283. In fact, it's so good that I don't see any reason whatsoever not to take this car on a road trip up here in the Scottish Highlands.
And there's arguably no better place to assess the credentials of a GT. Today's journey takes me in search of the Torridon Hills in the Northwest Highlands, home to some of the most dramatic scenery, spectacular roads that meander through the shadow of ancient rocks. It's a destination that's become a favorite of mine, but the destination could prove less spectacular than the journey, especially when you're in something that promises to be as potent as this.
Both models use two electric motors, one on the front axle and one on the rear. The one on the front generates 238 horsepower. In the RS model, the one on the back adds 456 horsepower. Together, they can generate a consistent 600 horsepower. However, for short 2.5-second bursts during launch control, they can combine to generate a massive 646 horsepower and 840 newton meters of torque. That makes this car the most powerful production Audi ever. Obviously, using all of that power wouldn't be very good for efficiency, but like I said, I'm not driving for efficiency today. I'm driving for fun, and what could be more fun than launch control? Traction control off, brake, foot to the floor, send. Oh, ow! Oh my God! Now this car can do 0 to 62 in 3.3 seconds. I have just done it in 3 seconds dead. You have to recalibrate your brain for how quick this car is. It's astonishing. It's got a 2-speed transmission, and most of the time it's running around in second gear for pretty much everything, but in launch control, it uses first gear for the most savage launches you can imagine. It's a different animal, it really is.
On paper, that kind of performance puts it somewhere between the Taycan Turbo and Turbo S, and with a price of £111,000, the RS e-tron also undercuts the Taycan Turbo by around £7,000. But even though these cars share a platform, does the e-tron feel different enough to drive?
Well, I think it does. It looks different, and it's also different on the interior. The Taycan is so futuristic. It has a huge curved display for the driver, but in the e-tron, it feels very familiar. This doesn't feel like too big a departure from other Audi models. In terms of the driving experience, I think there's a definite difference between this and the Taycan. Physically, the wheel feels like an Audi. It almost smells like an Audi as well, whether that's the leather, the materials, the glue, but also the way the steering feels is very distinct. In the Taycan, it's very sharp, very precise, very fast. In the e-tron, it feels fractionally slower and more deliberate. Not in a bad way. In fact, it might be perfectly suited to a GT car, but it's impressive to see that Audi were able to engineer their own DNA into a platform that's shared with another manufacturer.
There are some elements of Audi DNA that come to the fore. Quattro technology makes an appearance in the GT, reassuring in a place where the seasons change seemingly by the minute. When rain becomes sleet and sleet becomes a near blizzard, being able to direct the e-tron's vast reserves of power to the wheels that need it most is welcome reassurance.
Instead of using old school differentials to shuffle the power back and forth, this system feels much more digital, much more high-tech. In efficiency mode, only the motor at the front of the car is active. However, if you accelerate hard or switch into comfort or dynamic, the motor at the rear joins the party and activates Quattro much like it would in Audi's traditional cars. However, this switches on 5 times quicker than it would in their standard models. And that, in conjunction with a really responsive throttle pedal in which you don't have to wait for turbos to spool up, make the e-tron GT feel incredibly responsive. In terms of handling, well, this car is very impressive. It has a near 50-50 weight distribution, but perhaps more importantly, the center of gravity is very low, thanks to the batteries being located low down in the floor of the car. That helps it feel incredibly planted through the corners, and that, in conjunction with the staggering amounts of grip in this car, gives you a lot of confidence to hustle it through the bends. It's not a light car by any stretch of the imagination, and in some EVs it can feel a little bit unnerving to go into a corner carrying too much speed, but in this, not a bit of it. It actually feels very well behaved through the bends, and in fact the brakes are so good that you very rarely find yourself carrying too much speed into a corner anyway.
All-out pace isn't always the objective, of course. In a Grand Tourer, slowing things down to take in your surroundings can be just as rewarding. It's all too easy to become obsessed by the road when the true beauty of the journey can be found in the environments that surround it. The Torridon Hills, a mountainous region to the north of Glen Torridon, home to ancient Munros that stretch 3,000 feet into the clouds and some 500 million years into the past. When modern technology confronts ancient nature, worlds collide, but the future of motoring is being molded to help preserve the world we live in rather than destroy it. We're told that with its 0.2 drag coefficient, the e-tron has been shaped by the wind, that its optional leather-free interior is more sustainable, that its carbon-neutral construction is less harmful to our planet. Even its tactical green paintwork seems to blend more seamlessly. The success of this approach remains to be seen, but the effort, certainly in this case, should be applauded.
One question I had about this car at the start of this journey was, would this car feel soulless because it's electric? And I think the honest truth is, not at all.
The speed is astonishing, certainly enough to get your adrenaline pumping, but that's not this car's only trick. It also makes an engaging noise, synthesized by speakers of course, but more importantly, it's agile, responsive, and flows through corners in a way that's not simply engaging for an electric GT, but for any GT. What's more, it combines fun with efficiency. On this particular trip, I saw energy consumption as high as 2.6 miles per kilowatt hour, which translates to over 240 miles of real-world driving. With a lighter touch, longer trips are certainly possible, And with 270 kilowatt charging a possibility, range can be taken from 5 to 80% in less than 23 minutes. Good enough? Some would argue not, but on this occasion, no issues.
I've always thought of the e-tron GT as being a fascinating glimpse into the future, but it's more than that. It's a part of our present. It works here and now. It's impressive how they've made something so futuristic feel so normal, so fun, so shockingly current.
As a concept, the electric GT is one that might be difficult for some to embrace, but it's a concept that delivers in ways you might not expect. Whether you're driven by the efficiency, by the thrill of the journey, or by the splendor of the location, the e-tron GT proves it's possible for electric cars to be rewarding when they're driven simply for pleasure.